Hello, everyone. Welcome back to East Coast DNA's Road to Music Week, the 2025 Music PEI nominees interviews. We have Dennis Ellsworth with us today. Welcome, Dennis.
Thank you very much. Nice to be here.
So, first of all, congratulations on nomination for Album of the Year.
Appreciate that. Thanks.
I did want to go back a little bit. You're originally I think you started like songwriting like in your high school years as a teenager.
Yeah.
But you have quite the career where your name pops up in a lot of different places. You're involved in pretty much every aspect of being a musician in Canada, and you've moved around a bit. You spent time living out in Edmonton and a number of years in the Toronto area.
Yeah.
So, settling back in Prince Edward Island and having the exposure to all of the different creatives that you've worked with over the years, do you find that you bring something different to your sound than maybe what some of the other people in the region are doing that maybe haven't had the same exposures?
Hmm. Well, I'm not sure. I'm not sure it has to do with my exposure to other things. Uh, I'm a real listener. I listen to music all the time, and I listen to so many different kinds of music. And when I sit down to make my own music, I don't. It's funny. I had this conversation last night with some people in my band. I don't ever try to sound like anything. I
Hmm.
just absorb music and then whatever comes out of me comes out the way that it sounds. I don't ever direct it to sound a specific way. Whether it's a style of song I'm writing, if one of my records has more of a country feel, like, or a psychedelic feel or whatever, it just sort of happens that way because I feel like I let the songs kind of tell me what they need. I don't ever want to I don't ever want to box myself in, I guess, for lack of a
Sure.
better term. And I'm not saying that people around here do that, but what I'm saying is that I have a very organic process.
Yes.
It's always just, it is what it is. This is what I've got this time. You know what I mean? So my catalog is diverse for that reason alone, because I have made a subconscious decision, I suppose, to just let it flow naturally. Um, no, I don't necessarily attribute that to my living in other places or
Hmm.
access to, or like certain people in the industry I've worked with. Obviously, their influence is right there on the record if I've worked with somebody.
Sure.
But um, like you can tell the record I made with Joel Plaskett, you can tell Joel was involved.
Yes.
Um, it's a it's an interesting question. I definitely I feel like the music that I make doesn't really um it doesn't really feel East Coast.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
It
It's
it there's it there's no intention for me to feel East Coast, and
right.
there's no intention for me to not feel East Coast. This is kind of just my home. This is where I
Yeah.
live and where I'm from, and I love it here. And I make music that I want to translate around the entire world.
Yeah. And actually, you do have quite the long list of people that we could rhyme off that you've worked with over the years because it has been a very good career. But a couple people that are friends of the show, Sam and Josh Langell, had also collaborated
Yeah,
with you on a few of your solo albums and then the Money Go Round project as well.
yeah.
So I think the
I love those
timing,
guys.
yeah, the timing of that, the Money Go Round would have been around the early stages of this podcast as well. So it definitely was following along, and your name would pop up quite a bit. Now, those guys with Absolute Losers have also kind of grown over the last couple of years, and they're also up for Album of the Year. So I was kind of
Mm.
curious how that feels to see people that you've been longtime collaborators with that are kind of coming into their own with their own project right there alongside you for the awards this year.
I think it's amazing. That's how I feel. I
Yeah,
love those guys, and they make great music, and I'm lucky to have been able to collaborate with them. And I hope I'm sure I'll get to collaborate with them again.
yeah,
I mean, I think the money go round is just in limbo. It's not done or anything like that.
yes,
It's a project we can revisit whenever we want. Um, and I think what they're doing right now, and they're pushing hard, uh, and the songs are cool. They're making good choices, and I fully support what they're up to. I think it's incredible music. Uh, Again, it doesn't really feel like it comes from Prince Edward Island, if that makes
right.
sense.
Yeah, and that's
You
kind of
know,
why I wanted to reference them as well, is because it does seem that within the region that I primarily cover on the East Coast, we definitely have a lot of people that gravitate towards certain sounds that you expect from the region. Even some people that would be more alternative or rock, you can still hear those East Coast vibes come through, which to
yeah,
some degree is marketing, some degree is just it's who you know, and it is like to your point, what you're listening to inspiring you. Like if you grow up around it and that's what you're still listening to, that's going to come out in your own playing. But
yeah.
it does seem Prince Edward Island has a growing diversity in sounds that for such a small region, it's really interesting to see how many different sounds are coming out of the region that aren't necessarily the stereotype that you would expect to be coming out of East Coast.
For sure. And I feel like Prince Edward Island has sort of always had that quality. It's always had a real richness. There's a lot of diversity in what we offer, despite our population. And, you know, we have a lot of musicians here, and they all contribute something pretty cool to what we're presenting to the world. So, you know, it's just it's nice to be here and be a part of this community of musicians and writers and collaborators, and like it's a fairly small and tight knit, um, and I think world class situation we have going on here. So you know, I think uh, sometimes artists just naturally sound like they're from the East Coast, and that's a good thing for them. You
Hmm.
know, I haven't, I can't think of anything, examples, specific examples. But for me, I mean, if I were to sit down and try to make a record that sounded like the East Coast, I think it would fail. I think I would
Yeah,
be,
yeah,
you know what I mean? Like, I just don't think that I'd do a good job of it. So, because I wouldn't be kind of staying true to what I do.
sure.
And I think that's really important. And I feel like a lot of people here have that same headspace. Then they do it the way that they need to, and that's why we have such a strong music community here. So
Absolutely.
anyway, the question about absolute losers being in the same category as me, and I think that's amazing.
Now, for the album itself, Hardcore Freewheeling, you obviously have kind of alluded to it by talking about it in past tense, working with those guys, that you have a different lineup for your band on this. But I'm curious, outside of just the artists that you're working with on it, the strategy that you took for release as well. You went with a Bandcamp only release?
For now, and I'll explain
Yeah,
that. So I made this record in. Okay, let me back it up a bit.
sure.
In 2022, I flew to Vancouver and made a record called Modern Hope, um, out in Vancouver. Yeah, so I did that with Leroy Stagger in Vancouver, and from that album, I ended up signing a record deal with Tonic Records. And um, before that album was released in, well, it was released by the end of 2022, but before that album had come out, I had already done one recording session in Ontario with Jim Bryson because I had other songs that I wanted to record. So we started this record and we thought we were making an EP or a few singles. And as we listened to it, we thought, there's there's more, like we got to round this out. There's more songs. We need more songs. So I did 3 sessions. I flew to Ontario 3 times to make this record with Jim. And each time we had different studio musicians in.
Right.
We had a different sort of approach to it, which is kind of why the record's called Hardcore Freewheeling, because I didn't have a plan.
Hmm.
It wasn't supposed to be a record at first, and then it became one. And there's three different drummers on the album. There's two different bass players. There's myself and Jim play a lot of the other instruments and do the vocals. And then we had Carolyn Marie Brooks from the Good Lovelies come in and sing on it on a couple of songs. Um, so it was sort of a haphazard process. And when I presented it to the label, they weren't quite ready to release it, but I wanted it out because I have another record that I'm sitting on. So I had I had to get it out. So I went with a Bandcamp only release with a single on streaming, and the label release for Hardcore Freewheeling is April 2025. So they're going to
Okay.
put there's going to be a full release with vinyl and digital streaming and all that stuff is coming. With a marketing campaign and all that. But I wanted to have it out there because I had already been playing some of the songs live, and
Yeah.
I figured let's just get it out. So we did. The label supported that approach, and I went with that. And here we are. And I guess if I hadn't have done it that way, I wouldn't have been nominated. So that's, I guess, a good thing.
Well, yeah, that's what I was going to say too, as far as it as a strategy. I mean, like you obviously made the decision based on unique set of circumstances for where you were creatively, but it is a platform that is known to be very supportive of artists. And in a time where maybe it's died down a little bit lately as far as a narrative on streaming services, but I mean, Apple and Spotify, like the big ones, are kind of made out to be bullies that just aren't doing enough for artists and still being necessary, but you've kind of accidentally proven they're not necessary. Like if you're being nominated for the album itself and it's not even on those services yet, then
Yeah.
it,
There's
it's
only
it's
one
it's not
song.
required.
There's one song from the record that's on streaming, and there will be a second one soon. And we're going to do that strategy until we release the full record. But I've toyed with the idea of ditching Spotify and stuff like that, but it's too ingrained in the industry.
Yeah.
It doesn't it doesn't feel like a smart move. It feels like a spiteful move. And
Yeah.
to be honest with you, like, I have diversified, as you pointed out in the first bit of this interview. And I've been lucky enough to keep myself busy in all kinds of different projects and publishing stuff, writing for people. And um, like, I've found other ways to make money in this industry.
Hmm.
So I don't rely on streaming for any of it. Streaming is just a place where my music lives. It is a shame, I will say, because before streaming happened, any show I would play, like if I was playing somewhere to 500 people in England or something like that, I would sell about 40 or 50 pieces of merch.
Hmm.
I would sell to 10% of the audience. Um, and that would go for anywhere I play. If I was 100 people, I'd sell to 10 people. Now I might sell to one or two, you
Yeah.
know, because no, the world's different. I guess the market has changed. People have less money and all that stuff, but they also have access to the music
Yeah.
they want if they don't want to pay for it. And a lot of them don't know that the money doesn't really flow back to us. They think that it does. Where Bandcamp came in and got lucky, I wouldn't say lucky, but helped the arts and supported musicians, was during COVID. And it really helped people stay alive for a
Hmm.
while. And I think that it has died down a little bit, but so is everything else that
Yeah.
surrounded COVID support. So it's relative to all of that. Uh, and I don't think holding something back from Spotify is going to do anybody any good. Even Joni Mitchell and Neil Young couldn't make any difference. So if
Hmm.
if they can't do it, who can? You know what I'm
Yeah,
saying?
that's a very, very valid point.
Yeah. So hopefully what happens is car companies start putting CD players back in cars, and people feel the need to support. People buy vinyl, vinyl margins are small because they
Yeah.
cost a fortune. They cost a fortune to make. Like, yeah, and you can't charge what most artists charge off the stage. So you're making a few bucks
Yeah.
every time you sell one, and you got to carry them around for a while. They're cumbersome and blah 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 blah. I'm not complaining. I'm
Oh
happy where
yeah.
I am. It's just the reality of the situation. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, I definitely can relate in my previous life. I did retail sales for music merchandise, and I definitely know
Did
that
you?
there's not much money to be made there, and there's a lot of effort
Yeah,
just to maintain an inventory and make sure that you're not damaging things. So
yeah.
it can be a
And
lot.
I could also just scrap physical media altogether for a couple releases and see what happens. But I'm so old school and I'm such an album guy and I have a lot I'm a vinyl collector. I have been since I was 15 years old. You
Yeah.
know, when you could buy a record for $2, you know, and now I still feel like I need to have it for people who really want it. And I'll make that happen so that the few people who do want physical media can have it. Um, and that's just my way of doing it.
Oh, I definitely have
Um,
a soft spot for it. There's plenty off camera just floating around this room. There's barely any room for like regular things like a couch or a TV. So
yeah, regular things.
yeah. Now, I kind of another outside the box type thing that I noticed with you as well, like for live performances, that your upcoming performances, I expect, like I know that you've been through places like I'm in Pictou County over in Nova Scotia. I believe you played in Pictou maybe like in the last year or so. I've
Can't
seen your
remember.
name floating around through with like the DeCoste Center had a lot of shows that were in strange venues for a while they're under renovations. So I know there was a lot of names floating through there the last 2 years. Uh,
Yeah, I was supposed to do a show with a couple of other songwriters called Songs for a Small Planet,
hmm.
but it didn't happen for some
Oh,
reason.
okay.
I'm not sure what happened. It was around the time where they were moving venues around and
Yeah,
trying to
yeah.
find spaces, and uh, it just it just didn't happen. There was a listing for sure, but I don't think I didn't play that show.
So do you gravitate towards things that are a little different for your performances too? Because even your upcoming ones that I don't know as of people watching this if they're still upcoming or if they're in the past, but you have like a singer-songwriter style coming up soon, and then there's another thing I saw coming up at the end of February, Cover Me.
Yep.
Maybe you could explain a little bit about what people expect at those shows.
Yeah, so I'm playing a show on Thursday night with two other songwriters, Nick Donoff and Scott McKay. It's a songwriter circle
Hmm.
and it's at the Trailside in Charlottetown. I love doing song circles. They're relaxing and you know it's easy going. And I think that's a speed I enjoy. Um, the Cover Me show is at the Guild in Charlottetown, which is under new management, and they've reworked the room to be more of a black box theater style, which I always loved about it. Um, that show is so there's myself, Matthias Kalm from the Burning Hell, Carly Howell, and Alicia Toner, and we're all playing songs by another island artist. So I'm playing songs by 2 Hours Traffic.
Cool.
That's that's my contribution to that show. So I'm doing three 2 Hours Traffic songs. I've got four learned in case they need a fourth. You know what I mean? Um, so I'm looking forward to that. It's different than I'm used to doing,
Hmm.
but it's not altogether different. I used to do a show in Prince Edward Island called Someone Else's Song. I would host this. It was like a songwriter circle, but there were four of us on stage. We would all be responsible for playing one song from each of the other artists that were on stage. Then we would also have to play a brand new song that had never been performed, and then a cover of a song that you wish you had written.
Oh wow.
So it was a fun night. It was hard to find people willing to put the work in, but
Yeah.
we had some incredible nights doing that show, and I hope I can do them again sometime. But this Cover Me show is kind of reminiscent of that a little bit, so I'm excited to do it. I like to do different things and it's always nice to not have to get up there and play your own songs sometimes. So I'm I'm happy with that. Uh and then I got a couple things like I'm playing Folk Alliance in Montreal. I got a couple of things at Folk Alliance in a week and a half. Um and then Music PEI week. So I'll be
Yeah.
doing a show for Music PEI week and then preparing for some sort of a release show for Hardcore Freewheeling in April when the label puts out the record. That and
So,
then I'm gonna be bopping around the East Coast a little bit
uh,
this year, playing some shows. I'm still putting those together, getting ready to go out and getting my band ready to go out and do some shows. So I'll be busier this year than I have been in the past few years.
mhm.
Um, I've had a couple. I mean, I've been raising kids for the last 6 years. I got a 5 year old, she's almost six, and a 2 year old. So touring has sort of hit the back burner for the last
For
few years.
sure.
And with COVID, coming out of COVID into that lifestyle, I just felt fine staying home
Hmm.
uh, and and being productive in the studio. So I've got a lot of things recorded, and I'm sitting on a lot of new songs too, actually. So I've been busy, but next year, from probably springtime into next year, I'll be a lot busier around the East Coast. And then also, I'm going to start touring internationally again in 2026. So
Great.
I'll have a lot more to talk about in the future. I've been fairly quiet, but there's part of me that enjoys that too.
Well, we'll definitely recommend that anybody listening today follows you online so they can keep up with the album release and tour dates. And it sounds like if you're sitting on a few songs that maybe some of those live performances might have some new material bleed into them at some point too. So,
Absolutely. Yeah, like I mean, hardcore freewheeling is on Bandcamp, but most people don't listen to music on Bandcamp. So there's a lot of unknown songs on that one. And then I've made this other record called Living, and that'll be out probably before the end of the year.
well,
And then I've also started writing again, and usually that happens in little waves. So I know there's about half a dozen songs that are feeling good. And I might play one on Thursday. I don't know. I like to challenge myself and play a song that I don't really even know yet. You know what I mean?
yeah, I'd love
So,
to hear it. You gotta keep your own interest going so you could be motivated. So,
well, yeah, to some degree. I think it's just the way I've always done it. I remember in 2000, and I guess it was 2000, when Wilco were going through that debacle with Yankee Hotel Foxtrot, and they were playing shows uh and before the album had come out, and then they put the album online, and then from that point on, I would always try to source Wilco shows because they would inevitably be playing songs that were destined for their next record. They did it all the time. And I just remember always loving to hear the songs live before they were out on a record. Um, and around then, I think I sort of thought, I'm going to do that too. I don't know why I thought about it then, but I've maintained that. I'll play a song that nobody's going to hear again, probably for a year and a half,
yeah,
just for fun, for me, you know.
yeah, it's
See what the audience reaction is like.
yeah, it's great. I mean, it's good for the artists to get some feedback and see what the reaction's like, and then and for the fans, it's wonderful just to kind of follow the journey, and then you eventually get to see the polished version at the end. So it's always a nice little journey for the fans as well.
Yeah, I hope so.
And I've been asking all the artists too before I let them go, because I will be bringing the show over to Prince Edward Island several times this year. I'm looking for recommendations from residents of the island that maybe I'm not going to necessarily find at the top of my tourism list. So if there's
Okay.
any venues or eateries, just maybe a couple haunts that you might recommend somebody swing by while they're visiting.
Well, there's a great Mexican restaurant here called Tequila,
Okay.
um, and they just got a new location. If you like Mexican food, it's fantastic. I always recommend either Blue Mussel Cafe or Slaymaker and Nickel because those two restaurants are just at the top of the pile for me. They have great owners and great staff. It's just a great dining experience. Um, so that's for dining, I would say uh, worth a look. And the Mill in New Glasgow is a really good spot. Even if you're just bopping around, if
Hmm.
you're just driving around out towards Cavendish or something, and you want some snacks to go, they have a really great grab and go lunch counter at the Mill.
Perfect.
Yeah,
That's amazing.
their chocolate chip um, cookies are unreal. Yeah, and they just have great salads. Yeah, you can't go wrong with the Mill. So those would be four places I would try to tap into if you have the time.
Perfect. I'll definitely add them onto my itinerary. So
Yeah.
I might run into you in one of those places, but I'll also be over for the entire music week as well. So I'll have to make sure I get out to your performance.
Oh, that'd be great.
And if
When do you?
anybody, oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, are you here right from the start to the finish, or
Yeah.
are you
Yeah, I'll be there for
okay?
the entire week. So we'll definitely have to take a minute to say hi for sure.
Definitely, that'd be great.
And for anyone out there that hasn't already subscribed to East Coast DNA, please do so now. There's a ton more content coming out for not just Music PEI, but there's a lot of nominee interviews, and then there'll be content coming out from our trip over to Prince Edward Island as well. So thank you for everyone tuning in, and thank you once again, Dennis, for joining us. And I'm looking forward to meeting you in person when I take the trip over.
Likewise, and thanks for this.
All right.
Appreciate it.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.